This is the College Blitz on CBS 17 Plus.
Wow, okay, the College Blitz gets into November, and man, we really didn't decide much of anything this past week in the Triangle in college football, which sets up two of the most exciting weeks of football that you can imagine for these teams. I don't necessarily think that Duke, NC State, and UNC are where they want to be as football programs, but there is no question that what's coming up these next couple weeks will be a lot of excitement and will decide an awful lot about not just the current season, but the future of all three programs. Welcome to CBS 17 Plus and the College Blitz. I'm Kevin Holden. All season long, every week, we've broken down what has gone on with college teams in the area, specifically Bill Belichick and UNC, Manny Diaz and Duke, and Dave Doran, NC State. All these guys have been pushing, struggling, trying to get to certain goals as the season has gone along. And one of the biggest goals, I don't care who you are, but one of the biggest goals is to extend your season in some capacity. And by this, I mean bowl games. And the unfortunate thing is, with 2 weeks remaining in the regular season, there is not a bowl-eligible team in the Triangle. None of these three teams have gotten there. You've got a couple of 5-5s and a 4-6 among these three teams, which again means that these last 2 weeks are going to decide just about everything. Why don't we start with Duke, a team that had a chance to make a statement in the ACC, to maybe get an inside track on the ACC championship game in Charlotte. They were among a group of one-loss teams in the conference, and they had Virginia in Durham this past Saturday, a chance to eliminate another one-loss team and put themselves in position. Unfortunately, that is not how it worked. For Duke, they lose 34-17 as Virginia goes to 9-2 overall. And by the way, one of those two losses is a non-conference loss against a conference foe, NC State. Little weird quirk of the schedule, but NC State's one of two teams that has beaten Virginia this year. UVA is 6-1, and they're certainly eyeing that trip to Charlotte, where for Duke it's much more of a long shot now. Darian Mensah in this game threw for only 213 yards and one touchdown, and he lost a fumble during the game. Not the performance that he would like, certainly not up to the standards of numbers that he has put up in previous games. Duke's defense, though, might be the more disappointed unit in this game, because they allowed 133 yards and two touchdowns to Jamari Taylor, and they allowed 224 rushing yards to the Cavaliers as a team. Duke's points basically came about a minute apart in the fourth quarter. There were two touchdowns. There was a Darian Mensah passing touchdown to Cooper Barkate, and then a couple of plays later with Virginia on offense, Trey Freeman picked a pass off. It was a pick six, and he went limping into the end zone holding his left leg. Which unfortunately is kind of a microcosm of how things have gone. For Duke, even when things have been good, there's always been that lining this year of something bad. But what has changed for this team in the last couple of weeks? When they had beaten Clemson a couple weeks ago, Manny Diaz was talking about needing to be the same team consistently on a bigger stage, because his team was beginning to get into a bit of a bigger stage. They were headed, hopefully they thought, to at least contention for the ACC championship. But since that 46-45 win at Clemson, that potentially program-changing win, they scored 31 points against UConn and lost that game, and they scored 17 against Virginia and lost that game. So two straight losses has turned a very hopeful season into now a 5-5 campaign, where Duke has to come up with one more win, either against UNC this week or against Wake Forest in the final week, just to be bowl eligible. So this loss to Virginia is kind of a hinge game, right? One that the season really could have turned in an upward direction, but instead just disappointment really for the Duke Blue Devils. Manny Diaz talks about the disappointment, but again, the uptick, the silver lining in the cloud, those two touchdowns in the fourth quarter.
Very disappointing night. We were thoroughly outclassed in every category by Virginia tonight. I think I have to give them full credit. I think that's as well as they've played all year. I think their quarterback was outstanding and in terrific control throughout the course of the game. Coupled with is one of the poor performances of our season. I am pleased at the heart and the fight that we showed in the fourth quarter. When it looked as bad as it did at 31-3, to come back and get a couple touchdowns there in the fourth, and that does show that there is a backbone to this team. There's a backbone to this program. And that's what it's going to take going forward, right? And that's all it's about now. It's about a fight for these last couple of weeks. Everybody's aware of how important this next week is in this program to this university. And with what I saw in the fourth quarter, I believe our guys will be up for the challenge.
Manny Diaz goes from looking for the entire program to take that step forward and show themselves to be good week to week to now just looking for a silver lining in the fourth quarter of a loss to Virginia as something that he can build on, for the UNC rivalry that's coming up. We'll talk about that game a little bit later on. Let's start with, we started with Duke. We'll go to NC State here. They lost 41-7 to Miami to drop to 5-5 on the season. This was admittedly going to be a difficult test for the Wolfpack. A road test against a Miami team that still thinks that, the playoffs are kind of at least out there in range, and they really wanted to show that that they were worthy of that spot. So Miami came in with that extra motivation. The Wolfpack fall to 5-5 on the season, and there is a distinct home road split that it's at this point it's kind of hard to ignore. To be honest, the Pack are 4-1 at home. That includes a win against Georgia Tech that had the fans storming the field. Certainly one of the high points of the program, which was just a couple of weeks ago. They're 1-4 on the road. Their only road win was September 11th at Wake Forest, and since then, they're a 2-5 team overall. That includes home and road since that win at Wake Forest, and we'll get a little more into the road stuff here a little later in the show, but I will say this, the NC State has allowed 44 points a game in their last 4 road games, 45 to Duke, 36 to Notre Dame, 53 to Pitt, and now 41 to Miami. So not only are the Pack losing games on the road, they're falling behind early, the defense is struggling, and they're fighting uphill basically the entire time, something you cannot do, especially with the momentum of being on the road, the momentum being against you, dealing with the road crowd and all the other conditions that come with a road trip. C.J. Bailey threw for just 120 yards at Miami, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. The team is held to 23 rushing yards. There's just nothing there that to give you a ton of excitement for what's to come. And Miami scored double-digit points in each of the first 3 quarters. So it wasn't much of a pass game or a run game or a defense. Okay, so with all that in mind, and knowing that Dave Doran has ahead of him what he's got in these last couple of weeks, Dave Doran did something interesting. Didn't spend a lot of time talking about the Miami game with his team. They looked at some specifics, and then they flushed it, because they've got a couple of key weeks ahead, and there really isn't any point in looking back when you've got these big 2 weeks in front of you.
This morning we had 12 days of the regular season left with 2 games, both at home, both at night, one against Florida State, one against crosstown rival. So there's a lot on the table in a short period of time, and dwelling on what just happened doesn't help us get to what's next. And so, as the leader of these men, you got to steer them, and, we get to choose our attitude and our effort, and it's going to be chosen wisely. We got to do it the right way, and it's my responsibility and privilege to help these guys do that. And, adversity is definitely something that we're accustomed to. This season, it's been a lot of it with the injuries and other things off the field on our staff, and it's just another test, and so I know these guys will play really hard for each other down the stretch, and you got to focus on where you're at and what's available to you, what you have left, instead of just what you don't. You don't get to change what happened in Miami. You don't get to change what happened in Notre Dame. You can only learn from it and try to make your next opportunity better.
So for Dave Doran, the idea is to just change things completely for these last couple of weeks, not in terms of scheme or in terms of personnel or anything like that. Obviously, he'd like everybody healthy here for these last couple of weeks, but the point is he just wants his guys to focus on what's to come, because what they want is still in front of them. One more win makes them bowl eligible, a couple more wins, and they can improve that bowl a little bit better. They've got a Florida State team coming to town on a Friday night. That would be another terrific opportunity for the Wolfpack to pull off another, I don't know if you call it an upset. Florida State is certainly not what we thought they would be at the start of the season, but it would be a big win for the program. And then, of course, they finish out with UNC in the rivalry game there. So a lot of big stuff ahead. not a lot of looking back to what has happened over the last week for NC State. For UNC, their game this past Saturday was a 28-12 loss at Wake Forest, and that 2-game win streak was snapped. UNC had sort of been riding this upward curve over the last month or so, increasingly competitive in games. They turned close losses into close wins, and then eventually looked like they were getting some separation, but Wake Forest just proved to be a little bit too tough. There are years where you could really blast someone for that, but to be honest, Wake Forest has been a problem for just about everybody this year. They've beaten SMU. They're 7-3 overall, and they held UNC without a touchdown in this game, nothing but field goals. The Tar Heels with just 56 total yards on the ground and 201 through the air. And again, this is the type of game that Wake Forest has played throughout the year. They really have. They've been a good defensive team. They've made it difficult for offenses, and UNC's offense is still kind of finding their footing. So that's understandable. And on the Wake side, they rushed for 223 yards in this game and only completed 15 passes, mostly because they only had to complete 15 passes. There was not much in the sense of urgency as UNC's points just weren't coming outside of the field goals. What's interesting for these Tar Heels, and at this point in the season, you can get a really good sense of exactly what your units are capable of, your passing game or your offense maybe in general, your defense, your special teams, what they're all capable of. And I think this game says a lot about exactly where UNC is now in all three phases of the game. The most points that UNC has allowed in a road game was UCF. That was a 34-point effort on the road. Wake was the second most at 28, which is not an especially high number. It's bad if you only put up 12, but 28 can be a winnable game in the ACC. And everybody else that UNC has played on the road, they've held to fewer than 28 points. So that tells you an awful lot about, again, how the defensive unit has helped to carry this team at times, how the offensive unit has struggled at times. And the 4 field goals tell you that at least the special teams unit's got that part figured out. There is an offense and special teams meld of sorts there, right? Your offense has got to get down the field enough for you to get those field goals. So there is a little bit of credit, partial credit for the offense, although Gio Lopez and all those folks in the offense would really like touchdowns as opposed to field goals. They would certainly help the cause if you're trying to win those games. So UNC drops to 4-6. NC State is 5-5. Duke is 5-5. And what that means now is everybody's got a whole lot to play for in these last couple of weeks. We've got a rivalry game coming up, Duke and UNC, and we've got NC State on a Friday night welcoming Florida State to town. We're going to get to both those games here in just a little while on the show. So stick around. This is the College Blitz, CBS 17+.
This is the College Blitz on CBS 17+. This is the College Blitz on CBS 17+.
And welcome back to the Blitz. Kevin Holden here in the CBS 17+ studios, getting you ready for, well, I guess technically this is week 12, right, of college football. Getting toward late November, getting to that time of year where teams and players have to fight through fatigue. They have to fight through injuries. They have to fight through other teams knowing exactly what they've done up to this point in the season and having to make adjustments and having to find a way to get better games out of guys as the season reaches its conclusion. It is not easy this time of year for anybody. And in the middle of it, you add in the rivalry. Duke and UNC. It's going to be Saturday 3:30 in Chapel Hill. And man, look, I said this on the air on a show on CBS 17 recently. I mean, they could match up in a paper airplane contest and it would be intense. There's no question. But you do this on the football field where both teams are still looking for bowl eligibility in the next to last week of the regular season, and that will certainly be big for everybody involved. UNC has done pretty well in this series in recent years. But they've all been close games. I wrote these specific numbers down. In 2022, UNC won 38-35. 2023, UNC won 47-45 in 2 overtimes. Last year, it was Duke 21-20, and that win from Duke snapped a 5-game UNC win streak in the series. So they play each other close. I don't want to say throw the records out because they probably would both be okay throwing their records out at this point. But the point is, what has happened in those games coming in might mean just a little bit less because the intensity, the rivalry, the adrenaline that goes into it means a little bit more. But if you are comparing numbers and talent on each side of the ball, this is the point where you put them side by side and you realize how different the offensive numbers have been. Gio Lopez has thrown for 1,425 yards. Darian Mensah has thrown for 3,007. So Lopez has thrown for half, a little less than half of what Darian Mensah has in the passing yard category this year. Some of it was injury. Lopez was out briefly during the season. But a lot of it is just that Duke has been able to move the ball through the air. They've been able to, go at least between the 20s through the air and put up points in games, and Mensah's been a big part of that, where UNC has struggled to find that sort of consistency, let's say, in the passing game. If you're talking about the UNC's top running back, that's DeMond June, 452 yards. Top wide receiver, Jordan Shipp, 498. So there's not a running back or a receiver who has gotten to 500 yards for the Tar Heels offensively. So how they win games is defense. I mean, I'm stating the obvious, but if we're going to back it up here, with statistics, the most points that they have allowed in their last 5 games was Wake Forest with 28. So the last 5 games, this is post-Clemson when things got all weird and apocalyptic for some folks. The last 5 games, 21 points allowed, 17, 15, 10, then 28 against Wake. So the defense has certainly gotten to a point where they could help carry this team, this UNC team, and that's been a huge plus for Bill Belichick and company. We're going to hear from both sides, but let us start with Bill Belichick, who spoke on Wednesday leading into the big rivalry.
Our players, as well as our staff, we're excited for the competition and excited for the, to participate in the rivalry and for the seniors, the great opportunity for them and our team, our last home game this season. But honestly, it's been kind of like that all year. I mean, these guys have come ready to work every day, and some days end up better than others. But that's in terms of being ready to prepare to practice, being ready to practice. Going out there and playing with good energy and enthusiasm. It's been pretty solid all year. But you can see a little uptick yesterday in practice, and certainly there's a higher level of urgency, but I wouldn't say it's gone from 0 to 100. It's ticked up a little bit, but it's been pretty consistent all year, and we've shown improvement through a lot of the season, and I think that's reflective of stringing days together.
And there it is. Bill Belichick speaking it like it is, that the improvement of this team may not necessarily have come in March or April or May or July or August, but it came. It came eventually. It came after, the early games in the season, then a bye week, and then the Clemson loss, and then another bye week. And then finally it started to come together for them over these last 5 games. So they're probably in I would say, the best position that they have been in all year to face a team like Duke. Maybe a week ago might have been their best spot, just because now they're coming off that loss to Wake Forest, no touchdowns. They've got to find offensive confidence. So that's a little bit on the lower side. On the Duke side, 2 losses in a row, as we mentioned, after their win at Clemson, and the tone has changed. When they beat Clemson on the road, Manny Diaz, I'm sure, was thinking in terms of the greater goals of this team, maybe an ACC championship game berth. And hey, you win the ACC championship game, and now you start thinking about, it's not just a bowl game, you start thinking playoffs. It gets much different once that happens. But it has been very much back to earth for Duke since then, with the losses to UConn and then this past week's loss as well. They're allowing 39 points per game in their last 3, which isn't great for anybody, but especially a team like Duke that has built their success in the last couple of years on defense, that has touted their defense as a centerpiece of what they've wanted to do, as a centerpiece of their identity. Allowing 39 per game in a 3-game stretch in November is definitely not ideal, not the thing that they were wanting to do. But again, I could spout numbers all day. We could talk about passing numbers and rushing numbers and defensive numbers, but it's about rivalries still in the college game. Even in the NIL era, that's still the case. Now, the challenge in the NIL era for some is imparting what this rivalry means to new players. Because, for example, UNC has 70 new players on the roster. Those guys have never played Duke in this situation. The Duke guys in this situation have never battled UNC. Darian Mensah's won. He was at Tulane at this point last year. But for Mensah, there has been no trouble getting the importance of the rivalry and the adrenaline of the rivalry imparted to him. He understands the assignment.
Definitely some juice going into this game. Huge rivalry, and I think we'll be ready. I think today was a good game, and a step in the right direction. And yeah, rivalry games are always fun, so we'll be ready to go. If you can run the ball, you have a much higher chance of winning the game, and so we've got to come out with some fire and make sure we can run the ball, just so we're not in obvious drop back situations. Because as you said, they like to get pressure on the quarterback, and I think they do a good job of that. So. Yeah, we're gonna have to be elite, and as a unit early, and that helps our defense out as well. As far as they'll have to be in obvious passing situations.
Duke knows that a win makes them bowl eligible. UNC knows that a win keeps Duke from being bowl eligible for now, and it moves UNC one win closer to possible bowl eligibility after all the struggles they had early on this year. That's a massive win for the program if that can happen, but UNC's got to win out. They can't just beat Duke this week. They have to beat NC State next week. And speaking of the Wolfpack, they're at home Friday night against Florida State, and man, if you said to me before the season started, that Florida State and NC State would be battling on a Friday in late November, and they'd both be 5-5, I would say that there would be some disappointment in a couple of different places, but especially in Tallahassee, and that's the interesting part for them, because for the second straight season, Florida State entered the season with an awful lot of expectation, not as much as the previous year when they went 2-10. But I would say at this point, both these teams could be playing for their coaches' jobs this week and next week. Norvell certainly is in a rough position if he falls to 5-6 with the loss. Dave Doran, I would think that anything under 6-6 would be a problem, and maybe 6-6 may not be what NC State is looking for. It's a changing landscape in the football world, and Doran has been around a long time. So at NC State, so see what happens there. And we've talked a little bit about NC State's home versus road splits, how obvious they are. And remember that they do end the season now with 2 games at home where they're 4-1. That is certainly a better situation than trying to go on the road where they've just had so much trouble. This is one of those teams that is, for whatever reason, the home road split is just super exaggerated. So that's a challenge they don't have to overcome. But there is certainly a challenge anytime you face Florida State. Dave Doran's certainly aware of that.
As a play caller, as a defensive coach, who comes in the game matters. And, whether it's 1 tight end, 2 tight ends, 1 back, hey, 12's in the game. And then where do they align in formations? Every team you play, there's sometimes some nuggets you get out of that. Gus has been calling plays a long time, and he's a really good football coach. He's got a deep playbook and, stuff that we're preparing for. We know there's going to be other stuff that he's got in that book that plays off of plays. And so we got to be able to use our rules and adjust the formations and be where we're supposed to be. And then you got to make plays. You got to tackle their speed and space. You got to play jump balls on big guys. And then the quarterback, you can defend everything really well, and then he can get out of the pocket and score from anywhere with his speed. So, it's a great challenge. And as always, as a competitor, you look forward to those challenges.
Florida State and NC State Friday night at Carter Finley Stadium. Duke and UNC Saturday afternoon in Chapel Hill. Other games happening in the area, in the region. Campbell and NC Central finish up their regular seasons. Campbell is on the road at Towson, trying to avoid a double-digit loss season. They're 2-9 right now, Campbell is. And NC Central at 7-4 wraps up their regular season at Morgan State, who comes in 4-7. Everybody else is done. The CIAA championship is over. Congratulations to Johnson C. Smith, champions of the CIAA in that game held in Durham this past weekend. That is College Blitz. We've got one more week of the regular season after this. And I have a feeling those might be the biggest games of the year, not just in the sense of UNC and NC State, for example, maybe playing for bowl eligibility for either team. Duke might be in the same boat too. There are no bowl eligible teams as of the taping that we're in right now, and it could be the case next week. And can you imagine the intensity with everybody playing for their postseasons? That would be certainly something. So the bottom line, don't go anywhere. Join us next week for the College Blitz as we wrap up the regular season, what has been a wild 2025 campaign. I'm Kevin Holden. We appreciate you watching CBS 17+.
This is the College Blitz on CBS 17+.